Blessings and shalom. We're on the eve of a very important Jewish observance. Tomorrow at sundown begins the great celebration known as Hanukkah. And Hanukkah is an 8-day celebration that the Jewish people hold to. And what makes it such a great celebration is there's so much that we can learn from it. There's so much history behind it. And there are so many lessons that we can take from it. Just to give you a little bit of a background into it, almost 2,000 years ago, in fact over 2,000 years ago, the land of Israel was under the control of the Assyrians, and in particular a very wicked man by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes, or Antiochus IV. He was known by both names, and he was a terrible man, and he attempted to strip the Jewish people of their culture and of their faith and of their belief in God. He wanted to turn them into a pagan society and make them mesh with his culture and with his pagan beliefs in false gods. And many of the Jewish people unfortunately succumbed to these types of pressures which Antiochus IV put upon them. And many of them chose to actually bow down to these false gods and even sacrifice to these false gods. They compromised their beliefs, but there were some who resisted. And in particular, these ones who resisted were known as the Maccabees. Now, the Maccabees were a brave group of, you might call them rebels. They rebelled against Antiochus and his corrupt government because he was a cruel man, and his attempt was to try to destroy the faith of the Jewish people. And they didn't agree with this. The Maccabees held strongly to the Torah, the law of God. They held to it, and they believed in his commandments, and they didn't want to give up his commandments. They wanted to hold fast to what he said because they believed God's word firmly and completely, everything that was written in the Hebrew Bible, in the Tanakh. And they did not want to fall prey to the idolatry that Antiochus was trying to put upon them. So over the course of 3 years, they led what you would call almost like they were the inventors of guerrilla warfare. They surprise attacked the Assyrians, and they began to run them out of the land. They began to really fight hard against them until eventually Antiochus was driven out and the Jewish people had control of their land once again. And because of these brave men's sacrifices, they retook the temple which Antiochus had defiled. He had completely defiled it. He had sacrificed unclean animals, animals that were an abomination to God. He sacrificed them upon the altars and really made God's temple a place of shame. But what Hanukkah literally means in Hebrew is it's the word for dedication, because it commemorates when these brave men, these brave soldiers, took it upon themselves. They were a ragtag team, but they took it upon themselves to fight against this unjust regime that was led by Antiochus. And as they took the temple back, and as they restored it to where God wanted it to be, they found just a little bit of oil that was undefiled, that Antiochus hadn't corrupted in some way. And they only had enough that they believed would last for just one day. And so they lit up their menorah that they had. They lit it up. They put the oil inside, and they only expected it to last for one day. But guess what? God did a miracle. He caused that one day that they lit it up to last for 8 entire days and 8 nights. I mean, that's amazing when you think about it. God did a miraculous thing. And there's just so many lessons that we can take from this. These brave men, when they went in and they fought, they didn't know whether they were going to be able to restore the land. They didn't know whether they were going to be able to take it back. They were the few, they were the faithful, and they were the remnant. But they stood up for what they believed in. They stood up for their faith in God. And I want to encourage you that that's what we need to do now, especially now. It's a difficult time, and there are a lot of false doctrines that are going around. There are a lot of evil thinking, wrong motives out there. People are doing things for the wrong reasons. People are inventing new types of evil every single day. And God at this time calls us to be faithful. And especially if you've placed your faith in the Messiah, Yeshua, or Jesus. If you believe in Him, if you're a follower of Jesus and you know without a doubt that He's the Messiah, then may I say that Hanukkah is one of the most important days that you can remember. It's one of the most important observances that you can remember, because God did such a miraculous thing on that day. The most important thing that I find when I look into this celebration is I look at the lights. I just think of how light symbolizes the ability to see when you think about it, because when you're in the darkness, you're stumbling around. You don't know where you're going. You don't know right from left. I mean, you're tripping. You can't find your footing. But it's like when the light comes on, then you know where you're going, and it's like your path is illuminated. May I say that Messiah is the light. Jesus, or Yeshua as He's known, is the light. He's the light, and truthfully, He is the miracle of Hanukkah. Because when you think about it, the 8 days that this menorah stayed lit, these faithful men lit it, they only expected it to stay lit for 1 day, but God miraculously caused it to stay lit for 8. May I say that as long as our Messiah and His light is in the world, and as long as He's within us, we're the lights that are shining forth in the world, and we've shined forth much longer than the world gave us credit for. They didn't believe that we would be able to continue on. They thought our faith would be dead long ago. But may I say that it's stronger than ever, and that the faithful few who have remained faithful to Messiah and faithful to the God of Israel, we're just continuing in our strength. We're continuing to go forward in His path and in His might. And may I say that at this beautiful observance, may you just remember the heart of this celebration. Hanukkah is just such a great, great observance, full of so many lessons and so many miraculous things that God did. And so much of it came forth because His people were willing to take a stand for what they believed in, and they were unwilling to compromise. They were unwilling to waver. So may I encourage you today, as we're about to enter into this great celebration, may I encourage you that whether you're Jewish or you're a Christian or a Messianic Jew and you've put your faith in Messiah, may I say this is a time to look to God, look to the God of Israel, and remember that He is the one that made this possible. He is the one that has shined forth His light into a very dark world. And it's important for us to shine forth our light, and important for us as believers in the Messiah to shine forth the light of Messiah to the entire world, that they may see and they may believe and they may be saved. Because the eternal God and His Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus, is the eternal light. He's the one that shines forever. And we've been given such a great honor to take part in this great celebration. So I just want to say to you, Happy Hanukkah, and may you enjoy this great and amazing observance which God has made possible. Blessings and Shalom.